I wanted to make a quick video for beginners comparing the recurve bow to the compound bow, going over the pros and cons of both. But I need to stress this video really is aimed at beginners. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of tuning bows and checking brace heights and everything else. This is purely for people starting out, not sure what bow they'd like to buy. Perhaps they have a limited budget and they're looking at both wondering, oh, what would I prefer? This is who I've aimed the video at, just covering the basics of what you'd need, what they're like to shoot, how accurate they are, how much money they cost. The recurve bow is the Oakridge Dymond 35-pound draw weight, which I bought for £130 about 3 years ago. This is about the least amount of money you can expect to pay for an entry-level beginner recurve bow. The compound bow is the Bear Legit Ready to Hunt, which I bought for £315, recently reduced from £360 a couple of months ago. And again, this is the lowest you could expect to pay for an entry-level compound bow that's actually worth buying. Now, when you buy a bow, you're obviously going to need to buy arrows. Now, the sort of cheapest arrows you get will work out at around £5 an arrow, and in my experience, that's for the recurve and for the compound bow. But I would advise you buy more than less, as you're guaranteed to lose them, break them. They're not particularly durable, so it is always worth having more than less. And whilst on the topic of durability, it's probably best to mention that you're definitely going to want to buy a bag, not only to store the bows in, but also to transport the bows safely and all the equipment you need to use the bow. Both bags, I think for a recurve bow, you can expect to pay £30 for your average sort of bag, and about 80 to 100 for the bag for the compound bow. There are a variety of different quiver options. A quiver isn't necessarily required, but if you like to have a quiver, you can have a bow quiver, which will fit either to the recurve bow or can be fitted to the compound bow. You can also use a hip quiver, which is quite popular, and you can also use a back quiver. Another thing people often overlook is buying a dedicated archery target, as they tend to want to just shoot things they have laying around the garden. But you can have foam targets, which are great for the recurve bow, or you can have bag targets, which are great for compound bows, compound crossbows, also the recurve bow. But I wouldn't recommend shooting the foam target with the compound bow, as the arrow is more than likely going to go entirely through the foam target. Lastly, of the little bits and bobs that you don't necessarily have to buy straight away, but they're things that I always carry either in the van or in the bag with the bow, which is a surveyor's tape for measuring out yardage, which to me is quite important. If you watch my videos, you'll know that I use it in every video. I like to be sure I'm shooting at the yardage I claim I'm shooting at. An arm bracer with a shooting glove and a bow stringer. Those are three items that are quite important, in my opinion, for using the recurve bow. And then also the release aid, and carrying some tools, some hand tools around for the compound bow. You'll find that you'll end up needing to tweak the compound bow, tweak the sights, tweak the cams. So it's these little things that it's best to have them with you if you're going to be doing archery quite often. Moving on now to the actual shooting of the bows, I thought I could combine the speed element, not speed as in the feet per second of the bow speed, but the speed in which you can knock and loose arrows on target. So, as like usual in my videos, I set the target out at 30 yards and loosed 3 arrows with the recurve and then 3 arrows with the compound bow. Now, I was actually trying to get these on target. I wasn't just shooting as fast as I could. I was actually deliberately aiming at the bag, so we could see, not only can we see how long does it take to shoot the 3 arrows from each bow, but also see what the accuracy like is at 30 yards. I'd like to use this portion of the video to just make you aware that shooting a recurve bow is significantly easier for a beginner than shooting a compound bow. And shooting a recurve, getting a consistent knocking point is so easy compared to a compound bow. The learning curve of a compound bow is much more significant, and the compound bow is a lot heavier. You can feel the compound bow is, in my opinion, more difficult to shoot than the recurve. Not that it's any less fun, but it does require a lot more skill than the recurve. Now at 30 yards, the groupings look relatively similar. I don't think you could pick out a winner. However, I was aiming for the middle of the bag target, and one of the compound arrows went into the middle. But I think at 30 yards, you can't really say one was any more accurate than the other. What I can tell you from experience is that if I was to shoot 15 arrows, all 15 of the compound bow would hit the bag, but maybe only 13 or 14 of the recurve bow would hit the bag. Even at 30 yards, although much slower, the compound bow is definitely much more accurate. I just wanted to turn the sound on for these arrows striking the target, as I personally think it sounds quite cool as they go past. You can hear them being loosed and you can hear them go past the camera and hit the target. Now this is at 40 yards, and again I'm aiming for the bag target. So a quick assessment on the groupings at 40 yards. Only shooting 3 arrows each to keep the video short doesn't show how different the accuracy actually is. I would never miss the bag usually at 40 yards, but it was quite windy. You could probably hear in that previous segment it was quite windy. It is more difficult, despite what you're seeing here. The compound bow is significantly more accurate, even though the groupings do look quite similar. So I left the sound on for the first 3, just so you can hear how windy it actually is. It was a force 4 wind, and I just wanted that to be evident, because it will affect the accuracy. So as you can see, I paused the video. The 3 shots from the recurve hit the target. The first shot from the compound bow hit the target. The second one just went right of the bag and through the foam target. And it's so fast, I've had to slow this down to 10%, and you can only just catch it going through. So targets at 50 yards. With both the recurve and the compound bow, I was aiming for the bag target, the small bag target in the center. All 3 recurve arrows missed. They were all high. At that distance in that wind, I was aiming significantly higher and a little bit left of the target, just to get it to hit the foam board, let alone actually hitting the target bag. There's no way I was hitting the target bag unless by fluke in that wind. Now the compound bow, again, 50 yards. I have only been shooting it a few months. I'm still getting used to shooting it. So you can see the difference there. I've got significantly more, hundreds more hours on the recurve bow than the compound bow. And for the most part, I only missed with that 1 arrow by a couple of inches. And the grouping would have actually been quite tight had it been a couple of inches to the left. So at that distance, you're really starting to see the difference in accuracy between the 2. I actually have to admit as well, I've had a good day today despite the wind, as I wouldn't usually go 3 for 3 at 50 yards with the recurve bow. The chances are I would fall short. The bow at 35 pounds just isn't powerful enough to go that far unless you really aim it quite high. So I did have a good shooting day today, weirdly. So in summary, if you are looking to buy a recurve, You can expect to pay around £130 for the bow, around £50 for 10 arrows, around £30 for a bag, and around £30 for the other bits and bobs, string wax, bow stringer, arm bracer, glove, taking you to around 240 quid. So if you were to budget £250 to get yourself started, that's not including a target, that's just for that setup. The target, between the foam and the bag targets, you're looking to pay another £50 to £100. So if you budget £250 for a recurve bow, the compound bow of the same caliber, you're looking at around 315 for a bow, 50 quid again for 10 arrows, 80 quid for a bag, and about 50 quid for the accessories you're going to need, wax, the string release. You're looking at around £495, so let's say £500. So for the same entry-level bow, you're probably at double for the compound bow. 500 for compound, 250 for recurve. Then you could safely allocate £100 for surveyor's tape and a target. In terms of accuracy, compound bow, much more accurate actually than the video made it look. I didn't want to make a long video, but I have, when been alone, taken 20 shots with the recurve and then 20 shots with the compound bow, and I can assure you compound bows are much more accurate. Also, it's worth noting I have significantly more hours shooting recurve than I do compound. Speed in which you can knock and loose, again, recurve definitely faster. You don't need the release aid. It's quicker to knock the arrow as well, and the bow itself is much lighter, so it's quicker to manipulate, in my opinion, than the compound bow is. The last thing to mention is maintenance. Now, with a recurve bow, it doesn't really require any maintenance, at least a beginner bow doesn't. You buy a couple of extra strings for £5 each, and as long as you keep the string waxed, I mean, I've never changed the string in 3 years, and I have spare strings. So I just wax it every time I use it. I keep the bow stored without the string on. I take the string off every time I'm finished. I keep it stored in a cool, dry place. And that's really it. The compound bow requires much more maintenance. Now, if a string snaps or once the string starts to fray, I don't personally own a bow press. A bow press can set you back £500 to £1,000, or a bow shop change the string for you. Not only that, every time I shoot the compound bow, I check over it at the start. I make sure all the cams, all the Allen key screws are tightened up. I make sure everything's tightened up. I wax the string. There is much more in terms of maintenance for a compound bow than there is for a recurve bow.